With patch 2.4 bringing the ability to upgrade set items, I set out to try to prove whether or not any of these items are mathematically valuable to upgrade. So from normal to exceptional or exceptional to elite. I have a big spreadsheet to share with you so you can do your own tinkering and you can apply your own consideration to it. I'll go over literally what you would need to consider while doing this, which sets actually have valuable items to upgrade, and why you would want to upgrade them. On top of that, I'm going to share with you the entirety of our data sheet and the methodology by which we created it so that you can infer your own differences and your own changes or value, copy and paste it, apply your own equations to it, and see what you get as well. So if that's something that you finally want the answer to, welcome to the comprehensive upgrade set tutorial explanation evaluation video. Let's get into it. Here's my plug. Like and subscribe. Subscribe to the channel. I could show you the graphic, but I don't like to shame people too bad. Basically, like 3% of the people who watch my videos are subscribed, and we put a lot of time and effort into this kind of stuff. And if you like this stuff and you think that other nerds like us would benefit from seeing this kind of stuff and having this deeper understanding, it really helps out the channel if you do so we can help spread to as many people as possible. So there you go. There's my pitch. For people who don't know or who are new to the game, there are sets in the game that will typically give you additional benefits for equipping more of them and give you a total set bonus if you wear all of them together. With the changes in patch 2.4, you're now able to take the base item and upgrade it. So you'll see here that I'm using a Vidala's set that's using a Crusader bow, a Wormhide armor, and a mirrored boots. So these are all the elite versions of the items in the set. The benefit of upgrading a base item can very easily get broken down into a couple key pieces. One, if it's a weapon, the base weapon will typically increase in damage. If it is a piece of armor, that is the chest, helmet, gloves, or belt, you will increase the defense of the base. The belt will increase the number of slots that you can put potions into. Your boots will both increase their defense, but also for the assassin, increase how much kick damage they get. And then for a shield, it'll increase the chance to block, and then smite damage if it's used by a paladin and the skill smite. The downside of upgrading these items to their higher bases is that it will typically come along with higher strength requirements, higher dex requirements if it's a weapon, and then higher level requirements across the board. So Vidala's is typically a very low level set, but you'll see that we now need to be level 69 to use this weapon, level 62 to use the armor, and then level 72 to use the boots. And just as a comparison point, the amulets and rings of any set cannot be upgraded, so this one would have only required level 14 for you to equip everything if you hadn't upgraded all of the bases. To get a little bit deeper into this concept, you also have to understand the fact that increasing requirements isn't necessarily a bad thing, depending on what benefits you get out of your gear. So if you're increasing the base damage of a weapon, if it has enhanced damage on it, you're getting more bang for your buck by doing so, and the stats that you need to increase to use it, i.e. strength or dexterity, are typically also going to increase your weapon damage and or your attack rating. So that's not the worst. I'd say that the worst increase that comes along with upgrading a set is probably the level, because very typically, especially low-level sets, are tuned to be used as a low-level character, but when you increase it to something like level 69, even though the base damage might get really high, or the base defense might get very high, you're probably going to be able to use better item choices by that level. There's a strictly stronger item. Quickly blast you with that much information, here is the spreadsheet. You'll see that we went through every single set that's available in the game that can be upgraded. The only set that can't be is Bulkathos, because both of the weapons are already elite. And what we did was, based off of a barbarian, so a starting barbarian, we calculated the required strength that you would need to put in to wear your new gear, the required dexterity that you would need to wear your new gear, the level requirement of the gear itself, if there was an increase to minimum damage, to maximum damage, to your total defense value, whether or not the block chance increased on a shield of this set, whether or not the min and max shield damage increased for smite. For sets that have boots, we captured the minimum and maximum kick damage, and then for belts, we captured whether or not the number of slots that you get increase. To be able to see the kick damage, you have to be an assassin. To be able to see the smite damage, you have to be a paladin. But for every other value, we took it as if a barbarian was equipping this. Barbarians are just really good, easy to equip low-level sets. On top of that, they are able to equip multiple weapons, so if there was ever a chance that having 2 weapons might get you an additional benefit, we would be able to capture that here. Luckily, no sets that have weapons that you could dual wield actually see any actual benefit from upgrading multiple of them as far as the overall quality of the set, so you don't have to worry about that in this data. And then for any of the class-specific sets, we equipped those with the class themselves. So Aldur's was worn by a druid, Natalya's set was worn by an assassin, etc., etc. But the key difference there is that we still considered the base dex and strength of a barbarian, so we could keep that variable consistent. And then on top of that, we looked at block chance as if you were a barbarian. So the only time that that really comes up is for Griswold's shield and for Triangul's shield, and you are able to see what the block value would be if you could equip it as a barbarian. So those values are also consistent comparing against the barbarian themselves. Now, the important things to understand for this set of data is not whether or not the runes and materials that you would need are worth doing. The entirety of this test is just to see if you upgrade these set items, do you come out with a net positive of stats or a net negative of stats? And then the last bit, we always upgraded every single piece that could be upgraded. While you could theoretically break down every single item and determine whether or not only upgrading the weapon is more valuable than only upgrading the chest or the helmet, that would be a little bit too intense. But what I do have is insight into each different set and what is valuable to upgrade from them, so I can show you that. Now, for people who don't want to look through all this data, which I assume is the vast majority of people, I try to make it as simple as possible to read, and we are going to use this value and this value to determine whether or not it is useful. So row 1 here goes, if I upgrade from a normal to an exceptional set, considering a weighted value, so applying different weights to these different stats, I have all the weights down here that you can check. If you want to, you could feel free to copy and paste this, change your weight, and then apply it across the board, and that will change your evaluation according to what you think is important. But to very quickly go over it, out of the bad stats, I considered that increasing the level requirement was probably the heaviest detractor from the value of a set item, and then increasing strength and dex, while not necessarily good, are also not that bad. So keep in mind that you increase damage, you increase attack rating, it's easy to put more strength and dex on your gear, but you can't choose to be a higher level. So that's why level has the strongest weight here. Then for all of the good values, so everything that you would want to increase on your gear, I consider min-max damage as well as belt slots to probably be the most important stats across the board. So if you are pick a random character using a random set, you probably care the most about your damage increasing and your quality of life, which would be how many belt slots that you have. And this becomes very important because the majority of normal to exceptional sets are going to have most of their weight behind whether or not their belt gets. The next highest value would be the defense value. Defense value is obviously important because, hey, I'm increasing armor requirements. I better get tankier because of that. So I gave that the second highest value that you could get here. Then considering more specific weights, like only assassins care about kick damage, only paladins care about smite damage, just about everyone cares about block chance, I weighted kick damage, min and max, above block and shield damage, because the majority of set items are going to be upgraded to account for assassins having better kick damage wearing them. Then block chance comes in just beneath kick damage because it applies to the majority of characters and builds, but not every build is necessarily going to care about block chance on a set item. And then with the lowest value added to it would be smite damage, because paladins are very typically not even really going to be using set items for smiting, but especially in the earlier game and early leveling and early hell progression, that damage might be relevant, especially if you're trying to do something like Ubers on a button. Just to go a little bit deeper, I included all the calculations that we've done. So I included the raw evaluation as well as the weighted evaluation. After looking at the weighted evaluation, it was very easy to see that there was a lot of noise in our data. Basically, evaluating everything at the same weight meant that whether or not your belt increased was going toe-to-toe with whether or not the level increased. And those values are just different as far as whether or not the set is now more viable. So you can take a look at the raw values as well. Just understand that the weighted values are telling a much simpler and easier to digest story. Now let's actually talk about what they mean. So any blank cell means that there were no normal items to upgrade into elite items, because not every set has normal items in it. Some of them start off as only exceptional sets. Anything in yellow has a value under 0. So what that means is if you take into account everything that you gain versus everything that you lose, you come out net negative as far as stats are concerned. The more negative you are, the less open to interpretation this becomes. So something like the angelic set having a slight negative from normal to exceptional is you are getting a stronger weapon, you are getting better defense, but the strength in the angelic set doesn't really lie in the base stats of the items themselves. It typically deals in the set bonuses. And since we can't literally evaluate every single set bonus against every other set bonus, and we can only look at the stats that are increased from upgrading a set piece, you have to keep that in mind. Just because this gets a negative value doesn't mean that the set is bad or that upgrading it is a total waste of time. But if you're looking at something like the Arctic set, which does have a little bit of a caveat, you'll see that you are drastically in the negative as far as value goes if you upgrade from normal to exceptional. Why is this? Typically, the requirements on the other pieces of gear other than the weapon don't really net you enough of a benefit to warrant the increase in requirements. Anything that is green or above 0 means that pound for pound, upgrading the set will net you a good amount of stats in relation to what requirements are also increased. Most things in the green are either going to be because you get a small amount of additional defense or damage without necessarily increasing your requirements. The kick damage or block chance goes up pretty dramatically, changing from the bases, again, without requiring additional strength to be able to benefit from it. Or the base set alone doesn't have any additional requirements and you get something bonus. Something like the Cow King set, you basically get free defense without increasing the requirements, since all of your base gear has such low requirements that you're already going to have met those when you're equipping them themselves. So the more positive you go, so the higher above 0 you go, the bigger benefit in general there is to upgrading the entirety of the set. Okay, now that we've covered how all the numbers relate to one another, we can very quickly go through the sets that I've marked here with an asterisk, which typically means that in addition to whether or not they get a positive value or a green value here, there's probably some additional nuance that would be beneficial for you to understand if you're considering upgrading these sets. So Aldurs, you see that you come out pretty decently above 0, and this is almost entirely in relation to the weapon, the Jagged Star. So this is able to upgrade to an elite base, which is just going to get you additional min and max damage on the weapon without legitimately increasing the stats. So if you're considering upgrading your Aldur set or using the weapon on another build, the weapon itself is probably the only thing that is worthwhile to upgrade here and would be good on any melee build that's dual wielding like a barbarian or a Zaeler like a paladin. While the Arctic set has a massive negative value here if you're upgrading from normal to exceptional, that's a lot of noise in the data because there's really only 2 pieces of Arctic that are worth it to upgrade, and that would be the belt itself has a massive increase in belt slots when you upgrade it, and in general it's just a really nice 2-item slotted set piece. And then the Arctic bow, which also has a massive benefit from being a 2-set bonus, is going to see pretty good damage increase while also not increasing the overall requirements by too much. So here, if you're looking to upgrade the Arctic set, the 2 benefits would be the belt and the weapon, and I wouldn't look at upgrading anything else. That set also sees a pretty massive negative here, and that's mostly being pulled down by the weapon, which is almost unusable. And then on top of that, while you can upgrade the gloves, the defense bonus that you get out of it really doesn't get you anything. The biggest benefit here would be out of upgrading the belt. So upgrading the sash, even only to exceptional, is going to get you a full set of actual potion slots. And then when used in tandem with the gloves is going to get you that 2-set bonus. And I would not be surprised if the vast majority of builds are using 2-piece depth way into the late game, and also seeing a lot of very specific PvP use as they already do, but you have that massive downside of not having a lot of potion slots, which now you can completely alleviate. Hwanin's overall increase is very drastically reduced by how many stat points you need to put in to be able to use it, but Hwanin's is probably the best set weapon to actually upgrade. And just to give you an idea here, the Hwanin's Justice, which you can socket, is already indestructible, gives you an AoE Ice Blast on striking, as well as 40 IES and 200 ED on the base, and this thing upgrades into a Colossal Volge. So not only is this a massive damage increase on any build that has a bunch of ED on skill, i.e. Leap Barbarian, Berserk Barbarian, Fury Druid. After you're done using this weapon, you could easily slot it onto your Mercenary as well, if you're going to pump out as much max damage as possible with your Merc on a budget. I think that Hwanin's Justice is probably going to be the most slept on set upgrade, and keep this in mind. I understand that putting a pull and a Lum Rune into upgrading this is costly when you're talking about BattleNet. Think about how nasty this weapon is as a starter weapon, and once you throw in a minus requirements and anything else jewel into it, you really don't have to invest that much strength into it, on top of the fact that any build that would be using this would already be investing a good amount of strength into it and getting a huge amount of additional enhanced damage because of that. On top of that, the set itself is actually just kind of nutso, so upgrading the belt for additional slots and just using the base armor and helmet is really good. I think too many people sleep on Hwanin's, but I'll stop gushing about it. Immortal King looks like it is a stronger upgrade than Hwanin's, and this really comes down to the fact that the level requirement and strength requirement to be able to use Immortal King's chest piece eclipse any additional level requirement or strength requirement to wear any other piece of gear. So you're basically not increasing any of the requirements at all, while simultaneously getting additional defense. So anybody who literally just had the runes and gems lying around could just have a stronger Immortal King set, especially if you're going to end up throwing it onto an earlier level barbarian that you're trying to get up to par and farm. The Isenhart set is not worth it to upgrade. That's just kind of across the board. I actually just wanted to point out that me personally, I always thought that the Isenhart set just kind of wasn't good enough. But if you look at it, it's actually pretty sick for what you get. Run walk, block chance, percentile AR, life leech, dual strength and dexterity, all res. On the helmet, you're going to get more all res. On the weapon, which has a really nice range of 17 to 18, so basically flat average damage, attack rating per level with IAS and min damage on it. And then the shield is also going to get you all res. I just wanted to point out that Isenhart's is actually a pretty sick set for any early game character that is willing to use the weapon and the shield on top of the rest of the gear. Just good. It's not good to upgrade. Don't get me wrong. Terrible to upgrade. It's just good. Milabrega's comes out positive when upgrading from normal to exceptional. It's just not that good of a set in and of itself. If you really wanted to, you could upgrade just the weapon and maybe just the shield, although it's not a good shield base for chance to block in general. If you're willing to commit to the strength and the dexterity, it's not that bad early game. It's just overall not worth it to actually upgrade it moving forward. Naja's set comes out net positive, and that's just because you can upgrade the circlet twice to get additional defense, and it doesn't increase the requirements against anything that you need to equip the rest of the gear. But in patch 2.4, Naja's is going to give you anywhere between 120 plus magic find starting at level 80 if you have it on swap, and it gives you teleport, which you need prior to Enigma anyways. It's just a phenomenal set, so if you haven't checked it out, absolutely do so. And then the full set's also just great on any fire build as a really nice budget starter that also gets you access to teleport. Just a phenomenal set. Natalya sees a pretty high value increase here as far as like net positive, and this 100% only comes down to the boots, which are only relevant on an assassin who wants to kick with them. But being able to upgrade the mesh boots from 23 to 52 damage up to 69 to 118 damage is just nice. And these would be upgraded on probably like the vast majority of starter assassins and kicksins or martial arts assassins that are using a kick finisher. I wanted to talk about Orphan's Call. Orphan's Call sees a net negative, but that is mostly due to the massive strength requirement that comes along with upgrading G-Face. And the shield itself on Orphan's Call is phenomenal to upgrade. Just gets you better block chance, better smite damage, and better defense without really pumping up the requirements. So if you haven't taken a look at Orphan's Call is just a phenomenal set. And Witston's Guard, which can upgrade now to a Luna. Very easy to hit max block with it, especially if you run into one of these in a hardcore playthrough. Thander's set is absolutely worth your time to upgrade from normal to exceptional. Especially if you're using the weapon on something like a starter Kicksin. It has a massive amount of elemental damage on the base item itself, and the rest of the gear is just free defense for upgrading it without increasing the requirements by altogether that much. Once you get past that point and upgrading it to elite, you lose a ton of the value, especially because the weapon is absolutely useless at that point. But upgrading from normal to exceptional, worth the time and effort. Sazabi set is worth it to upgrade because it's only the helmet and it gets you more defense without increasing requirements. I really wouldn't consider it worth the actual time and effort to make that happen. But considering the fact that Sazabi's is now a really good starter melee kit, as well as phenomenal in any dual wield build on the barbarian, you might as well have more defense on the helmet for free. Tal Rasha's set looks like there's a huge benefit here. This is just strictly influenced by the fact that you can upgrade the weapon, and the weapon base damage does see a pretty sizable increase without seeing an increase in the requirements. Don't upgrade Tal Rasha's. It's not gonna do anything for you. I just thought it was funny that because of like one particular set of data, this thing looks like it's outshining a lot of the other options. Tancred's set here is actually really good to upgrade from normal to exceptional. You get a massive amount of additional weapon damage, as well as defense on the rest of the pieces. Obviously, 2-piece Tancred's is probably all that you're going to run. But keep in mind that Tancred's weapon has enhanced damage on it, as well as the helmet has enhanced damage on it. So increasing the base damage of the weapon itself is getting a pretty sizable increase, especially if you're an early game melee character. Increasing the boots also sees a pretty good increase in kick damage overall, which means that you could rock 2-piece Tancreds on a higher level Kixen who's magic finding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this shareable so that everybody can take a look at it. Obviously, I want the data to stay the same, but feel free to copy and paste this. And like I said, manipulate the weights that are applied to each value yourself, or change how the evaluations are done. None of these are handcrafted, so they all have the equations that I use to actually generate these values, so you can look at the logic that was used to determine them and figure out whether or not you agree with that determination. One of the things that really stuck out to me is that once we found out that we could upgrade sets, basically everybody said, there's some weapons, there's some belts, it doesn't really matter. And that's not wrong. Across the board, most set items are not going to be good to upgrade, but if you're looking to hone in on very specific values like just min-max damage according to whether or not strength index goes up, or just block chance and shield damage because I'm a paladin, or just kick damage and belt slots because I'm an assassin, these values can pretty drastically fluctuate and most of the time end up going into the net positive even higher. And while I'm not trying to argue that just upgrade every single set, because quite frankly, you're not going to have the economy to do it, and they're going to be outpaced by better options depending on what level you are, there's a lot to be gained from actually looking at this with a quantitative and qualitative eye and determine what is the overall benefit that we're getting, and is there anything that we can kind of zoom in on and suss out some additional benefits for early game leveling, budget gear options, because not everybody wants to play a hammered in and a sorceress and farm Mephisto forever. Maybe I'm playing a challenge run or it's solo self-found. I have the runes, but I don't want to make any of the rune words with them. Might as well upgrade these sets to increase my mercenary survivability or twink out a new character. There's a lot to be looked at here, and there's a lot of benefit that I think most people are just kind of glossing over. Well, because most people wouldn't take the time and effort to break down all the numbers like this, apply math to it, and make a Twitch stream watch while you do it for 6 hours. I really hope that this helps, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next video.